Hello, this is Matt Carthy. This is Strasbourg in the European Parliament. This isn't the 9 o'clock news. So we've made it to our second Facebook Live event. I said at the last time that if we got 1,000 viewers, we'd do it again. So we actually had 2,500 viewers. Very exciting stuff. And we're going to try and beat that score with tonight's Facebook Live event. And what we're going to do is anybody who shares the event while it's going on or even afterwards, we're going to have a draw for one of these Towards a United Ireland mug. So you have the GUI NGL logo on one side and you have Towards a United Ireland on the other side. So it's going to be really a sought after item. There's a good chance in years it's going to be worth a lot of money. So anybody who watched it the last time, which we're after finding out didn't include Lynn Boylan, very disappointingly, we'll have to have words. But basically it's an informal discussion about some of the big issues that are happening, some curveballs maybe thrown in, but we want you to participate. We're going to try and do it a little bit better than the last time. So I think all of us have some form of tablet or phone, so we're going to try and watch. So if there's any comments, send them in and we will try and answer them. If there's any really complicated technical ones, we are likely to ignore them though, but other than that. So really good panel tonight. So Josu Juaristi is the Basque MEP. We often refer to Josu as the fifth Sinn Féin MEP. I don't know whether he considers that a compliment as it's intended or a deep insult, but Josu is a journalist from the Basque country. He was the head of the list. You're nominated by Bildu, the political party, and we're on a wider list. So Josu has been a really close friend of Sinn Féin's since we all came into the European Parliament together. We're also joined by Emma Clancy. Emma is a GUI NGL political advisor, works on the economic and monetary affairs. She's also a long-time Sinn Féin activist, and of course every show we try to have a token dub. It's part of my outreach to the Dublin community, and this month it is our MEP for Dublin, Lynn Boylan. So we're going to actually have the other Sinn Féin MEPs. I'm sure Leah and Martina are probably very angry that we haven't had them on the show as yet, but I do intend to have them on at different stages. Unfortunately, actually Martina, on a serious note, isn't in Strasbourg this week. Her mother passed away last week, Betty Anderson, an absolutely phenomenal woman, and we want to again extend our sympathies to Martina and all the family area. So we're stuck here in the Strasbourg bubble, and what we want to try and do is use these occasions to engage a little bit at home, especially on the week that the Taoiseach tells us we're actually latte socialists. I don't mind anyone drinking latte so long as it's from Towards the United Ireland mug.
Say that these are empty. This is the budget that provides when you're invited onto a show. You don't even get a latte.
Okay. Can we cut off Lynn's mic? I should have a button here. But we also found out that the Taoiseach doesn't actually mind, despite his protestations last week. He doesn't mind €30 bottles of wine so long as it's the taxpayer that's actually footing the bill. And it's also the week, and today is the day very especially when a Lucid Talk opinion poll from the north of Ireland shows that in the age group between 18 and 44-year-olds, a huge majority are in favour of a united Ireland. So that's the way we're moving, and we've been saying very clearly for the past number of hours to anybody who listen to us, we have to start putting in place some plans for that. So Josu, thanks for coming along.
No,
I know we're taking you away from a trialogue discussion, and we'll talk about trialogues
really exciting
another day. But thanks a million for coming. But obviously we've all been watching the situation in Catalonia and Spain, the wider Spanish state very carefully. The question I suppose a lot of people are wondering is this Spanish government the craziest shower of lunatics to get their hands on power in Europe in modern times? And that's no disrespect to any members of Theresa May's cabinet that are watching on, but what's the story?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, they are crazy. I mean, for them, this is Catalonia, the Basque country, is a state issues, not about Rajoy or which government are in place in Madrid, and this is because, in our opinion, there is a deep lack of democracy in the Spanish state. They are using the law just to do everything they want to prevent the independence of Catalonia or the Basque Country, no matter if all they are doing is against the so-called European values, against the fundamental rights, and they are using all means. And we saw that with Lynn in Barcelona on the 1st of October.
So, like, what's the likely, is it possible or likely that be a declaration of independence in the next couple of days?
Yes, I think that Catalonia has not any other alternative that go ahead and move for the declaration and see what happened in the international arena. I mean, we all know the first reaction of the European Commission was almost aggressive, was really terrible, and
why are EU leaders such a shower of cowardly hypocrites? Like, what's the...
Because Spain is... Yeah, no, because the Spanish state is moving like a lobby. I mean, they are maybe the fourth member state in the European Union, but they are...
Poland is a big state. They had no difficulty telling...
They have some similarities, really, and in many issues.
But the European institutions are always quick to tell the Polish government, or at least to try and intervene.
Yeah, so. But it's not for them. For some of them, at least, it's not the same. Some state member state coming from the east, from the...
Yes.
Yeah, and Spain, who is the model of transition, democratic transition, moving from the dictatorship to, and this is one of the problems that the European Union has to realize that the real face of Spain, or at least one of the real faces of the Spanish state, is what we saw on the 1st of October, and it's absolutely terrible.
You were there, Lynn, as well as Josu, and I think Martina, Owen, Trevor also.
I was, yeah, and while we were split up into different delegations, some of the footage that was seen on social media was shocking. I mean, women being thrown down the stairs, being beaten with batons, children, elderly people. It was absolutely horrifying to see it. But the one thing that stood out was the solidarity among the Catalans about the right to vote, and that it was completely peaceful, and they were putting their hands up in front of the police and saying, you know, like, so there was no stage where they were provoking the type of reaction.
No, but it was the opposite, because, you know, as someone who is often on protests, or when you're talking to people who are, you know, when police attack, the natural instinct is to throw a boot or something. Like, it was just amazing how the Catalan people, like the disciplines.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, and
was that organised, or did people just have the common sense themselves?
I think well, I think the Catalans are not unique maybe, but they are different in the way that they've approached their independence movement. And I mean, you have to take in all the context and the background and the history, but there's a huge amount of discipline, and I think that goes to the civic society and the two organisations and the two leaders of those organisations who have been held without bail. They have organised this in such a manner over the last number of years that it is so disciplined. And I seen it firsthand outside one of the schools. You had parents and teachers sleeping in the schools, occupying them effectively, so that so that people were going to be able to vote. Yeah. And what you seen was when the Catalan police came along and asked the question, "Who are you? Who's in charge here?" Two individuals started shouting at them, "You're operatives of the state," and immediately the vast majority of the people who were at the school were like, hang on, these are our police, they're doing their job, and that's it. And it was incredible to see that level of discipline.
And just in terms of the delegation, because as I say, there was quite a number of Sinn Féin people there. I suppose it should be put on the record, I wasn't sent to Catalonia, probably because it's too warm. They usually send me to places where it's raining and miserable. But you know, how was the interaction between, you know, effectively foreigners coming in, you know, looking over?
Well, I think probably, and I'm sure Josu would agree, the reaction you got when you went on, Emma, because Emma would have been at the polling stations as well, that the reaction you got from the people waiting to vote was, for me, one of the most moving experiences I've ever experienced. As soon as they saw your international badge, they just applauded and clapped you the whole way into the building. And I think in the first polling station, it was overwhelming because you weren't expecting it. And all they kept saying was, thank you, thank you, thank you. And please go back and tell the world what you've experienced. And please fight for us, you know, fight for our right to vote. It was incredible.
And tell the truth, please.
And tell the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's but of course it was all fake news.
Of course. Even Lynn and all of us were fake news.
The rubber bullets weren't real.
Yeah,
no.
yeah. It wasn't really anything that we were expecting something like that coming from the Basque country, but for the Catalan people was really.
It was just the stupidity of it.
I know, but always, yeah.
Because we know lots of national broadcasters, you know, they were quite happy. Like, RTE News didn't even have camera on. They had nobody there until the day. So on the couple of days after, now what's his name, Brian. The RTE, he's been there since. They're covering stories from Catalonia when there isn't even anything there. But I suppose from a Basque point of view, like, are you looking on jealous or annoyed that the Catalans are getting all this attention and nobody's considering, you know, the huge stuff, moves that have been made in the Basque country?
Truth, okay. But the steps that the Catalan people can make towards democracy, towards independence, are steps that we are doing as well. I mean,
and you think that it will be complementary?
Yeah, absolutely. And now in the Spanish state, I mean all the fundamental freedoms, democracy, all our rights, social, national rights. At the stake, in danger. Then. I'm
sure a lot of people, especially Republicans watching on, we would have had probably historically much stronger connections with the Basque independence movement than the Catalans, although we've always had very strong connections. I think it would be useful if you were able to give just a little update in terms of some of the developments that have been taking place in the Basque peace process.
Okay, really there are no news coming from the Spanish side, something that we can expect, of course, but we think that something is moving in, or at least is that we hope on the French side, especially since the 8th
on the French side.
On the French side, especially since the 8th of
because a lot of people might not know there are seven provinces of the Basque country.
3 of them in the north, in the French side, and 4 in the south.
So the French government appears to be more open to dialogue?
Yeah, well, at least since the civil society took the responsibility of putting the arms, the weapons of ETA beyond use on the 8th of April. We are maintaining some contacts with the French government at different levels, and the civil society, a delegation integrated by the civil society and all the political parties in the north of the Basque country are maintaining contacts with the French government, trying to solve or to make something to.
And I imagine the Spanish government is probably being very constructive also in terms of. So what is the response of the, because I know you basically had unilateral putting of arms beyond use on the part of, so all ETA weapons are now effectively decommissioned to use that
and
term.
The French government told that.
You know, the independence movements have signed up to democratic means of moving forward. So is it just a case that the Spanish government's pretending that's not happening, or are they actually making things worse? Or
no, until now they are pretending that anything is happening. But at least on one of the key issues of the peace process, that means the situation of the prisoners and the freedom of our prisoners, we still have about more than 300. And the French government, it seems that they are ready to do something or to move forward with the civil society and all the political parties in the north. So we'll see. And for us, from the very beginning, of course, it's one of our priorities in the peace process. And I think that is now the time to move and go ahead.
Emma's been writing. Writing a book on the Basque country since any of us have ever got to meet her. When is that going to be published, Emma?
After this document on Friday. No, I just wanted to make 2 observations around what's happening, particularly in Catalonia. I've been involved in Basque Solidarity for around the past 10 years, ever since I lived in Belfast, and it was always very shocking to people who were following the situation in the Spanish state that people could be jailed for running a newspaper, for joining a youth organisation, for basically participating in peaceful democratic politics.
And for trying to bring peace.
Yes, exactly, for trying to take an initiative to end an armed struggle. And so it was always kind of astonishing to me that there was never any attention to the fact that this was happening in the heart of Europe, in a European state, and because of the, you know, the ETA boogeyman, it was able to be, you know, pushed aside or pushed into the dark. And finally, with what happened on the 1st of October, the attention of the entire world is now on just how violent, how irrational, and how extreme the Spanish state approaches the movement.
But one of the things that, you know, frustrates me is that when I meet Spanish people, I like them. You know, you know, they're actually, you know, because they're like, why are their leaders so hateful?
Well, that's a good question. But I think it goes back to 1978 and the regime that was put in place to replace the dictatorship. And obviously we know that people who have looked into that history know that this transition never really dealt with, you know, there was no purge of fascists from the Interior Ministry. There's basically been a continuance from Francoism to today in certain areas of the Spanish state, and I think that's the key issue that people are now starting to become aware of. But one quick remark on the European response. I think the EU, the reason why the EU has taken such a pathetic, you know, dismal response to, you know, this massive violence against unarmed people in one of their own countries is simply because they're so terrified of the instability that a democratic movement being successful could actually cause within...
There's a question here from a Cal Mooney, you know, it says, why would the EU support Kosovo independence but won't support the same in terms of regions within the EU? What would it, if we had Jean-Claude here in front of me, what would he say to us?
What would he say?
If he wasn't drunk.
Have you got Clancy?
But the point is not if Catalonia is acting like Kosovo. The point is that Madrid or the Spanish state is acting like Serbia.
Yeah.
And this is the
but also on like the point that Em is making, what's interesting about the Catalan question is, I suppose, we're a Euro-critical party, and I think Josu, you'd be in a similar, that, you know, we have always been sceptical about how the EU would react to certain things, and in Ireland we experienced it with the bailouts and that. Yeah. I think for the Catalans, there's such a pro-European, and the vast majority of the movement is so pro-European, that it's a rude awakening for them, certainly, to see the lack of response from the European, and in the case of Timmermans, a very controversial response, effectively backing the
Oh, you really is. Yeah. It's sickening listening to them.
So I actually think that the EU are also shooting themselves in the foot. So whatever about the Spanish government and it being a rude awakening to what the Spanish are capable of.
I was debating earlier on Catalan TV, and the guy says, you know, well, the EU doesn't like to intervene in domestic politics.
So
I said, we have 64 billion euro of bank debt that says otherwise. But
I mean, they are feeding into. I mean, one of their most favourable, one of their biggest fans is now seeing actually.
But the other thing is that has to be a big thing is that from now on, whenever there's any issue in a third country, the EU talking about peace, human rights or democracy is just going to be laughed because they're not upholding those things. Okay, I'm just going to go through some remarks. Lots of very nice comments. People watching. Harry Alice, you were the first one to comment. So a guy called Liam says, Lynn, send one to Derry for me. I presume he's talking about a mug. Tara very kindly shared it. Fergal, Kellet on the Farney, you had it in one. Fergal, Tom Fox, Aisling O'Studdig. Yeah, Aisling, how are you?
She found her phone. Our phone's working again.
Right, okay. Dennis Malloy, Loud Fianna Fáil councillor, calls for a hard border following Brexit. What do you think of this? And then he says some very flattering things about the Fianna Fáil councillor in question, which I may or may not agree with entirely. Pat in Tullamore, how are you doing? John Darcy's commending Lynn for her role, and Ibrahim, we'll talk about that in a minute. Laura, Porrick, is aligning Pádraig McSean, aligning Fianna Fáil with the DUP and the UDA. That's a matter for opinion. Marie Kelly wants our 6 counties back, fair play to you. And John Darcy is having a good crack with the media and welcoming the fact that we have uncensored media here, not the RTE News. So I think that's them all. I'm fairly sure I'm keeping them all. So anyway, don't forget, we want to get loads and loads of viewers over the next while. So share, and we're going to have a competition for a free mug for everyone who shares. So listen, I'm sure everybody at home has been aware. We've been advertising it for the past while, and I hope everybody's excited about the launch of our Future of the Eurozone, a discussion document that Emma has prepared, and we're going to discuss, we're launching it in the European Parliament office this coming Friday. So there's an event on from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. The European Parliament office is in Mount Street in Dublin, so come along. We are going to try and do a Facebook Live event of that as well, but we'll probably be down to our own technical expertise. So there's a 50-50 chance that we'll mess it up. But so the best thing you could do is actually come along. Of course, Lynn won't be there for all of it because she's going on to Sean O'Rourke. I'm only assuming Brian Hayes will be there as well. He's usually there.
Well, I think he lives in the studio.
Yeah, but if you can come along. But Emma, I suppose just to whet people's appetite, maybe you could just describe the document and explain why it is that we've decided to publish a document like this. Okay, well,
the main reason that we decided to, in discussions with Matt, that we decided to produce this document and then launch it in Ireland is because a lot of the work that we do over here, Matt's a member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, a lot of the work that we do over here, it's kind of, we're told that no, this is too technical. You can't change these rules. You don't understand what's actually, driving the economy. So I think there's a lot of mystification of the economics of the Eurozone, and I think there's also an attempt to depoliticize the decision making that goes on here. So we get told that no, these are technical decisions, but actually they're deeply political decisions that have profound redistributive consequences for the people in Europe. So someone who has done a lot of work on that question of the depoliticization of particularly supranational bodies, so the EU in particular, is Thomas Fazzi. So he's going to be, that's an Italian writer and filmmaker who's also going to be our guest speaker.
And there's a couple of other speakers coming along as well.
Yep. So, I mean, that's the purpose of the document, but around the actual content of it, we try to look at the construction of the Eurozone and the ideology that underpins it. So the austerity ideals that were fashionable at the time that it was constructed, the ideas that were dominant coming out of the late 80s and early 90s in the period of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, just pure neoliberalism, that ideology has been proven to have failed. Everybody recognizes it now, even the IMF would.
So just because we're getting short on time, but the big question, I'm sure, Lynn, is the same that everybody who asks is, joining the Eurozone was probably the most nuts economic decision that we could have made as a small country. But leaving it would probably be almost as equally as nuts. So how do we square the circle? Because we know the euro has been bad for a lot of small countries, but the consequences of leaving are probably too severe. So how do we actually try and change the framework in which it operates?
Well, first of all, I think we actually need to have a serious and mature discussion about long-term viability of the Eurozone. And people like Joseph Stiglitz have, Nobel Prize-winning economists have proposed things like, a structured and agreed breakup of the Eurozone into 2 separate currency areas, for example, or for a legal mechanism to be introduced where countries who really desperately need to can actually leave the Eurozone without being horribly penalised. But that's, that's on one kind of extreme side. But in the meantime, there are actually a number of policies that could be put in place. For example, a common deposit insurance scheme across the European, across the Eurozone, which would prevent these debt crises and capital flight, which have marked the past 10 years. So there are a number of short to medium term proposals that can be put in place, and one in particular is for for macroeconomic powers and fiscal powers to be returned to the member states. So get rid of the fiscal compact. So this document goes through an analysis of all the problems with the Eurozone, but then it also proposes some possible solutions at the end of the very long document.
Josu, do you have a one-sentence solution to the Eurozone?
I will read the document. Just
yeah,
to know.
okay. Well, the document will be launched on Friday. We'll have it up on the site. So we're being told we have 5 minutes, but I did want to touch on one thing because Ibrahim Halawa has arrived back home this week, and we already have quite a number of comments, Lynn, commending you, although I read on Twitter yesterday that Sean Kelly was actually the first MEP to raise the issue. Apparently, he was also the first MEP to discover the Americas. So, but I suppose one of the things, reading through some of the internet commentary, is what was Ibrahim doing burning his passport in front of all these journal.ie commentators that
I know, trial by social media, despite the fact that it took 4 years of the Egyptian government trying to investigate him and they couldn't find a shred of evidence, and he was fully acquitted, and he's still being found guilty by some of the keyboard warriors. Look, Ibrahim didn't burn his passport, he didn't tear up his passport, he didn't give it to the dog, didn't lose it, nothing. He had his passport in his back pocket when he was arrested in the mosque that night, along with his sisters. The problem is that when you're arrested, as a lot of Republicans would know, everything is taken off you. And his passport was taken by the Egyptian authorities, and he has tried to get that passport back since he's been acquitted. And I think that it's very hard when a rumour is put out like that to try and shut it down. It's like whack-a-mole. You put the facts out and it pops up in another post. But it is deeply concerning that when you scratch the surface, it's like almost no matter how many times... That's
racism, basically.
Yeah, no matter how many times you state the facts of the case, there are people who know better than the UN.
But then, in terms of the positives, like the scenes in Dublin Airport yesterday were fantastic, and it was great to see you there in terms of all the work. Because let's face it, when you first started raising the issue, it wasn't as if it was going to guarantee you re-election or anything like that. You did it because it was the right thing to do.
Absolutely, and look, I think if people who watch, it was a fantastic celebration in the airport, and lovely to see people coming together like that with banners and welcoming him home. But what really struck out for me was Ibrahim's words. His first words coming out through that lift was around thanking the Irish people for supporting him, thanking his family, his friends, but also outlining how he has changed by his experience, which is about he now wants to campaign for prisoners of conscience. He now wants to campaign for homelessness in Ireland. So he seems
we need all the help we can get to deal with that.
And so the fact that he has this consciousness now of social justice issues, I think, is really heartening, and that he didn't seem to carry any bitterness, that he seems to have left that behind. But he isn't going to need help and support to come to terms with the fact that he's lost 4 years of his life. And when he was hugging his friends who, when he left, were smaller than him and are now towering over him and vice versa, they've moved on. They've done their leaving cert, they've gone through college. That might be a bit difficult for him, and I think
there was a great article in Waterford Whispers.
How to cope if you meet Ibrahim on the street, because he's such a threat to your existence. And I think the recommendation was, euthanize yourself by banging your head against a wall.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Not that we recommend that. So I'm just looking through comments. I don't think I've missed any in terms of questions. Sheo Lynchig talks about the Lucid Talk poll showing a majority, 56%, as against I think 33% of 18 to 44-year-olds in favour of a united Ireland. That's in the north, and Shea makes the point that we need to celebrate that and build it. So listen, that has more or less been it in terms of what we're talking about. Just to say that when we look at the views, we have booked a Vox Box to do another one of these in a couple of weeks. Don't forget, share, free mug. We're talking about doing that on, do I have a date? I have the time, which is 5:30 Irish time. But I think it's this day, fortnight. We'll do the raffle for the mug on that occasion, if that doesn't get. So listen to Josu, Lynn, Goramila Maihagut. I'm going to try and finish on a song. This is from Martina. All right, folks.
But every man must stand behind the men behind the wire.